Any of the reporting, not specifically about Workday, any of the report is nothing but which actually returns the data from the system. Okay, the data that is coming from the system is nothing but through reports you can actually extract the data. And extracting data in the form of reports are multiple ways. Okay, in traditional software systems like PeopleSoft, SAP, so we used to have a databases. Okay, so SQL Server or DB tool or SQL, Oracle tool kind of things where you'll be writing all the SQLs. Okay, to return the data that is sitting in the system. Okay, those are nothing but databases. Okay, database commands like SQLs, PL SQLs, you'll be writing to return all the data that is sitting. Let's say select star from table name. Will give whatever data that stores in the table, you'll be getting as an output format where you can extract the output and see what's happening with the table. So similarly, in other scenarios, you'll be able to get the data that is sitting in the table. We have not many tables, right? In not many tables, data will be sitting. Okay. And similarly, when compare this with Workday, you might not write a sequence or any kind of expressions, but the kind of similar functionality, similar kind of works that you'll be doing to extract the data that is sitting in Workday. Okay. So now to compare, I don't know whether you will understand the differences that I'll be explaining, but try to take this because this is the foundation of reporting, which is an important. Reporting is very important for Workday. Okay. If you just know reporting, don't know anything, there are lots of opening of reporting. Okay. If you're expert, if you're sound in reporting, you have a lot of opportunities to get into Workday reporting roles now. Okay, so just try to understand right from the foundation. Okay, what I'll be explaining. If you're not clear, just raise a question and get that clarified. The other sessions are different. What we had. So even if you don't understand with the configurations, if you go, that will let you to understand. But this is something, if you know the basics only, you'll be able to create a report. If you don't know the basics, if you don't know the actual theory of reporting, you will not be able to create reports. Okay. So that is the reason why be more focused. And if you're not following anything, raise a question. As I said, right, traditional software applications, we have a kind of table, okay, from which we'll be calling the data that is sitting on the table. If you remember in my initial sessions, the very first demo or the very first session, I would have explained you the data model that Workday will be following. Anyone remember what is the data model that Workday will be following? Anyone remember? How does data get stored into Workday? These things I would have explained in my demo or in the first initial sessions. Anyone of you remember here? How does data get stored in Workday and what is the model that Workday will be following in terms of actually managing data? Anyone remember? How does data get stored? Anyone remember? Till now, you have worked on business process, you worked on supervisor organizations, you have hired employees, you created positions, right? You manage some security also. Now tell me, how does data get stored in Workday? You have hired an employee. Okay. So you're getting an employee into the system. How does this employee is stored in Workday? Tell me. You have created a position. How does this position stores in Workday? Follows the data model called object model. Okay. So whatever data that you actually insert into Workday will be stored in the form of business object. Okay. So when you hire an employee, that employee information will be stored in employee business object, worker business object. Okay. When you're hiring an employee or a worker, that data will be stored in worker business object. When you're actually creating positions, okay, positions will be stored in positions related business object. When you're actually creating dependents of an employee, that information will be stored in dependent business object. When you're actually creating compensation grade, package, comp plans and all, those will be sitting in related compensation business object. In a creating supervisor organization, okay, that will be stored in organization business object. So every data that you create in Workday will be stored in their own related business object. Okay. And when you wanted to extract the data that is sitting in Workday, you need to know from which business object that you wanted to pull the data. You are getting the data into Workday that will be stored in those relevant business objects. Now, when you are trying to extract the data, trying to get the data, probably you wanted to send your the data to external systems through integrations. So if you wanted to extract the data, you need to know what business object that the data is sitting in, and you need to extract the data sitting in from the business object. Okay. So like that, if you compare in traditional software application, we call it as table. Table is nothing but which stores the data. In other software technologies, all the data will be stored in the form of table. Okay. And in Workday, all the data will be stored in the form of business object. Someone asks you, what is the model that Workday will be following in order to manage data? You should say Workday follows object-based data model, which stores data in the form of business object. Okay. And child table. We have a child table, okay, which is related to the parent table. Similarly, in Workday, we call it as related business object. Okay. So you can, if you wanted to create a report on worker, where you'll be getting all the worker information, worker name, worker employee ID, and worker supervisor, organization manager, the location, address, salary, anything related to worker. If you wanted to build a report, you'll be getting the data from worker business object. And in the same report, if there is a requirement to get worker dependent information also, maybe spouse or children kind of information, if that report wanted to have, what you'll be adding? You'll be adding dependent as a kind of business object, and the dependent will be becoming a related business object. Whenever you add any business object that is not the primary business object in the report, that business object will become a related business object. When I say related business object, it is nothing but child table. Okay. You will be creating a report on business object, which will be your primary business object. And in the same report, if you're adding multiple other business objects, will become a related business object. Okay. And traditional software application, we call it as view or SQL view. In Workday, we call it as data sources. What is the data source? The name itself says that it is a source of the data. Okay. Let's say if someone asks you, okay, to return all the contractors' information. I wanted to know who are all the contractors that are sitting in the system. I wanted to know that information. Okay. Now, contractor is also a worker, right? Contractor also is a worker. Okay. So when you are actually going to the worker business object, you will specify your data source as a contractors. Okay. If you specify your data source as a contractor, when you run a report, that will go into worker business object and pull only contractors. And similarly, if you give data source as all active employees, all active employees. If you are giving data source as all active employees, what does this will do? This will go for that particular business object called worker, and it will look for only active employees and pull active employees. It will not pull contractors. It will not pull terminated. It will not pull people who went on leave. It will not pull retirees. It will not pull any other employees other than active. Since you are mentioning data source as active employees, your report will run and go to the certain business object, and it will pull for active employees. So data source is nothing but, source of the data, view of your business object. You are getting the data from the business object in the form of data source. Okay, you based on the data source, you're trying to get the data that is sitting in the business object. Okay. These three are very important. Okay, forget about these three: table, child, view, SQL. So this is just I've given to compare with Workday. So you'll be when you are working on reports, you will be working on these three: business object, related business object, data sources. These three are important, without which you cannot create a report. Okay. So if you know these three, how does these three works? You're through to the reporting concept. You'll be able to understand how reporting works. Any questions or anything not clear here? Because this is very important. If you're not clear, just raise a question. If you're not able to follow, just try to get me that. So I'm not following this one. I didn't understand this. Just raise questions, because if you're not understanding this, you're definitely not able to understand the other reporting concepts.
It's a data model to extract the reports.
It's not a model. Business object is nothing but which stores the data. The model that Workday will be following to store the data is object model. Business object is nothing but which allows you to store the data in Workday in the form of business object. Okay. What is an example?
Worker.
You would have hired lot many workers. When you're creating a supervisor organizations, when you're hiring, you would have hired lot many workers, right? Now I will ask you, get me all the workers that you have hired in a report. I'll ask you how you will do this.
We'll get the data from worker business object.
Yes, because when you hired workers, that workers went to worker business object. Okay. And from that, you'll be getting all the workers. Because you know that workers are sitting in worker business object, you're able to use worker business object in a report and pull that one. Now, if I'm telling you, I also wanted to have all the dependents of that worker. Okay. I wanted to know the information of their dependents, like spouse information, child information, their age, their things and all. I wanted to know. How you will be doing? You will be not getting dependent information from worker, right? Dependent are nothing but other information. They are not workers. They are not workers. Dependents are not workers, right? Dependents are related to worker. So what you can do? You need to use that specific object which used to pull dependent information. We have dependent as a kind of other business object, which you can use in the same report. When you are using any other business object in that report, apart from the primary business object, that business object will become a related business object, which is nothing but child business object, child object. Okay, this one would be the parent one. Let's say if you are creating report, okay, where you're trying to pull worker information. Okay, this would be your primary business object. Primary business object. And then when you're adding objects that stores different information, let's say dependent is one thing where you're trying to pull all the dependents of a worker. Then this will become a related business object, which is nothing but child object. And this would become, when you add child, this would become parent object. The primary business object will always be parent, and anything related business object will be child business object. And similarly, if you wanted to get ratings of an employee, whatever manager has given, manager rating, if you wanted to get for an employee, you can give that specific, let's say, employee review business object, okay, which will be holding all the reviews that employee has got from the manager. Employee review, sorry. So what is this? What object this will be coming under? This is a parent or child? Employee review. I'm adding in the same report to get reviews that manager has given to an employee. So this would become a parent object or child object?
Child.
This will become another child. So like this, you can add any number of business object that will be as a kind of related business object. You can add n number of related business objects to the report, which are child business objects to the parent one. You can add employee review, you can add learning. If employee has completed any learning enrollments, you can add learning enrollments. And you can add payroll. What is the pay that employee has taken? Okay, payroll related information you can add, and you can add anything related to compensation. You can add anything that you can add as a kind of a related business object for the primary business object. And you can add n number of related business object in the report. Okay, depends upon your requirement. Now tell me, what is the difference between primary business object and related business object? What is the difference primary business object and related business object?
In primary, we'll get the employee information, and in related, we'll get the information which is related to employees.
No, that should not be your answer. Okay, that's an example that I've given. When I ask primary, what would be the primary business object? Whenever you're creating a report, whatever the object that you're selecting, that will be your primary business object. And any other object that you're adding in a report other than primary are related business object. These are the examples. Okay, let's say if you're creating a report with a dependent business object, this will be your primary business object. Earlier I said, when you're creating report with the worker will become your primary business object because you have chosen worker as your business object. And then if worker is not there in the scenario and someone asks you, get me all the dependents of an employees who are sitting in the system. So you'll create report with the dependent as a business object. Now dependent will become a primary business object. If you're adding worker to that report, worker will become a related business object because you have chosen dependent as a kind of primary business object. And then if you are adding worker to that report as a related business object, this will become a child object and this will be your primary business object. Similarly, if you are creating report with the learning enrollments as a kind of business object, this will be your primary business object. And if you're adding worker to that report, worker will become related business object. It's not that only worker will always be the primary business object. Worker will also be a related business object based on the primary business object that you have taken. So primary business object and related business object maintain parent-child relationships. Clear with this? Anyone did not understand this? This is very important. Okay, so if you know, if you're trying to follow this, when you're creating report or when you're making any kind of reports based on the requirement that you get, you'll be able to complete without any kind of data missing. If you're not able to understand the concept, if you're trying to create reports, you'll not be able to understand. Now tell me, what are all these things? What objects are all these things? Dependent employee review, learning enrollment payroll, which I'm using in a worker object report. I've created a report and I've chosen worker as a business object. Then I've added all these things. What are all these things? What these objects will become now?
Related business
related
object.
business.
Related business object. These are all related business object. Now, if I'm actually creating report on learning environment, I've added worker as a kind of object. Okay. So which is the primary business object and which is the related business object here?
Learning is primary.
Enrollment,
Learning environment would be
primary,
your
and
primary
worker
business
will be
object.
child.
Your worker would be child business object. Okay. In that scenario, you'll be getting a lot of requests. Okay. So if you know how the data model and kind of object-based concept, you'll be able to understand the reporting part. You'll be getting a hell lot of requirements in reporting. So you need to understand the base, how to get the data, from where you need to get the data, when you're actually adding related business object, how to actually make some kind of filters to the data. You should be understanding. When you know these basics, you'll be able to understand the advanced concepts also. Now everyone are clear with the primary business object and the related business object? Anything not clear with these two terms, primary and related? If you're not able to understand, you're not understanding, just raise a concern. Don't just take it. Okay? Because all other further concepts on reporting will be based on this. If you're not understanding, just hold on. Raise a question and get it clarified. Okay. Now the source. Okay. Source, I was telling you, whatever data source that you are giving, your report will be running based on this data source. Okay. But the data will be coming from business object only. Whatever the primary business object that you have chosen, when you're creating report, this data source will go to the primary business object and get the data. Okay. If you have given all workers, okay, it will go to the worker business object and pull all the information because you have not specified anything specific. You wanted to have all workers. So data source goes to the business object and it will pull all the information that is sitting in worker business object because you wanted to have all workers, right? Since you have not specified anything, any specific criteria, your source will be pulling all the workers from the worker business object. And if you have given all terminated, what your report will do? The report will go to the primary business object and looks for only terminated. It will not pick any other criteria. It will only look for terminated employees and it will pull all the terminated employee information. And similar, if you wanted to pull people who went on leave, who are on leave, you'll be taking on leave related data source, which will go to the worker business object and looks for all the employees who went on leave. So data source is nothing but, which is a view of your business object. View of your business object is nothing but the data that is sitting in the business object. Data source is returning based on the criteria that we have given. So data source, without data source, you cannot create any report in Workday. Automatically, when you give your data source, based on this data source, your business object will be auto-populated in Workday report. So data source is nothing but view of your business object. Now, if I wanted to give, if I have a requirement to get all the employees who have got retired in the system. Okay. So someone has asked me, I wanted to know all the retirees who have got retired from the employment. I wanted to have all this information. So what would be your workaround here? What data source that you'll take here? So for active employees, you have taken active employees. The source you have taken active employees, with which you will be getting only active employees. For terminated employees, you are taking all the terminated employees, so that your report will consist of only terminated employees. For employees who went on leave, you are taking that specific related business, that specific data source. Okay, and that will be returning employees who were on leave. Now my requirement is I wanted to have all the retirees. Okay, what data source that you will take?
Retired workers.
So there is a specific data source for retirees. You need to choose that data source. The data source is all retirees. Okay. So the data source you'll be picking that will return for all the retirees. Don't worry about the names of the data sources. You'll get to know based on number of reports that you create, and I'll tell you the easy way how you can identify names of the sources and all. But just try to understand the concept. Okay. Forget about name. I don't know. I don't know what business objects are there in the system. How would I tell you how the data comes? I don't know what data sources that are sitting in the system. How can I get you the names? Forget about the names. Just try to understand the concept. Okay. If I'm asking you to get retirees, you should be understanding that relevant data source which pulls retiree information. You need to use that data. So at least you should have this minimum understanding at this stage now. Probably when we are completing reporting, you would be in a position to identify the data sources that are sitting in the system, business objects, fields, all you will be able to identify. But at this moment, since we are starting, at least you should know the concept. If you wanted to actually return the retirees, you must know that there is a specific source that looks for data sources and that pulls all the retirees. At this stage, at least you need to have this understanding. Okay, clear with the data source? Any questions on the data source? What is the data source? Tell me. What is a data source?
It's a view of business object.
Nothing but view of business object. Whatever data that is sitting in the business object, you're seeing in the form of data sources. Okay, you'll be giving data source, and your data will be returned from the business object through that data source. Okay, so you can say technically, whatever data that you are viewing in Workday, in reports, that is nothing but view of your business object through the data sources that you are choosing. Okay. Any questions so far? Any questions or anything unclear till now? To go a little deep into this data source. In Workday, we have two types of data sources. Okay, one is standard data source. The other one is indexed data source. Okay, the difference between these two data sources are, let's say as an example, I asked you to actually get all the terminated employees. Okay, what you will be doing? You will be choosing terminated employees as a kind of data source, and you will be pulling all the terminated data from the report because you have chosen data source related to terminated workers. Okay, so through which you are getting only terminated data. Okay, now let's say instead of using terminated data source, if you use all workers data source, what you will be getting? Instead of all terminated, if you are using all workers, what you will be getting? You will be getting all the employees, right? Terminated, you will be getting contractors, you will be getting retirees, you will be getting active, you will be getting people who went on leave. Every employee category you will be getting because you are choosing data source as all workers. Okay, so you are getting from this name itself is saying that all the status, all the criteria of employee will be pulling. Okay, so all workers, you are creating a report to pull all the workers, but your requirement is to get all the terminated employees. Okay, but you have chosen all workers as the data source. How do you actually get terminated from all workers? You know, when you use data sources related to terminated, you know, you will be getting terminated. But you also should know how to get terminated workers when you use a data source, all workers. So you can write a rule here. Okay, in a report, you can write a filter to filter the data for terminated employees. You'll be writing worker status is equal to terminated. You'll be writing this criteria. Okay, so that when your report is running up, it will be going to primary business object, worker business object, and it will be getting all the workers because you have given all workers. And when report is running, since you filter the data with this thing, worker status is equal to terminated, then as a second step, after collecting all the data from the primary business object, it will filter the data from what it has collected and gives terminated employees, because you're writing a condition here. Okay, where worker status is equal to terminated, you wanted to have your report to pull the returns. Okay, so here 2 steps it is performing. If you give the source all terminated, there is no second step. Okay, straightforward, your report will go to worker business object and it will pull terminated business object. But you are giving all workers here. Okay, so it will perform multiple steps. It will go and pull all the workers, and then based on this condition that you are giving, from the information that it has pulled, it will be filtering the data for terminated employees. So here 2 steps you are doing, right? So same thing if you relate to this one, standard data source. Okay, standard data source, where if you are giving standard data source, all workers, you need to write a filter condition for that one. Okay, but if you are taking indexed data source, okay, indexed data source at source level only, if you are choosing all workers as indexed data source type. Okay, now this is a standard one. Whatever example that I have given, the standard one. If you are choosing standard data source called all workers, but if you have a requirement to pull terminated employees, you need to write separate condition here. But if you are choosing same all workers as indexed, okay, index 1, if you are choosing data source all workers as indexed 1, you don't need to write this specific condition, because indexed data source will hold built-in filter options. Within the source only, you can actually filter that one. In that filter, you can specify terminated. Rather than adding separate line of condition in the report, at source level only, indexed data source, at source level only, you can specify that you are looking for only terminated employees, so that when your report runs, it will be faster, because that is not looking for second step. As indexed data source will have an option to add your filter options at source level only, so that the moment you click on run button of a report, this will straightly go and pull the terminated employees. But here what it is doing, it is pulling all the workers, and then it is reading this condition, filtering for terminated employees. Here it is performing 2 steps. Okay, so it is taking little time, but here it is performing only single step, because indexed data source, as you have an option to filter the data from source level only, and in that source filter you have given terminated, and the moment you run that report, that will straightly go to the business object and pull for terminated employees. Okay, so indexed data source provides built-in prompts, filters huge amount of data, optimizes your data, and the performance of indexed data sources is more better than standard data source. When you create reports on standard data source and indexed data source performance will be more faster than standard data source, because your indexed data source is not looking for additional filters, as it has its own filters at source level only. It is straightly looking for the data and returning. So it's not a time-taking activity for indexed data source, and that's the reason why the report execution time will be little faster than the reports runtime for standard reports. Clear? Understood this? Index versus standard data source. Is it clear or not? What is the difference between indexed data source and standard data source? If someone asks you what should be your answer, What is the difference between indexed data source and standard data source? What should be your answer?
In index, the filtering will be more easy. Steps will be lesser and it takes less time to filter.
Yeah. Indexed data source, at source level only, it has filtering options. No need of adding any additional filters. And that is the reason
Then
why.
what's the purpose of standard? Like we can always use indexed, right? What's additional purpose of standard?
Yeah. So after reporting, we'll be discussing something, the concept called calculated field. Okay, where you'll be tweaking the data. Okay. So those calculated fields can be used in standard data source reports, but not in indexed data source. Okay. The calculated field can more appropriately works better in standard data source related reports, but you might not add calculated fields in indexed data source. That could be the reason. If you are building a compensation report, okay, if someone asks you to get what is the annual compensation hike that employee is getting, what is the bonus percentage that employee is getting increment, okay, there are no delivered field that Workday provides for this purpose. Okay, you need to create some calculations. Okay, and if in order to use that calculations in a report, the standard report works best when you wanted to use those calculations in a report. So most of the calculations might not look for indexed data source. So if you have huge amount of data that you wanted to execute, in that scenarios, you may take indexed data source. But if you wanted to perform a lot of calculations, okay, so let's say you're building a report and your report should return all the benefit elections of an employee. Okay, so you need to have all these benefits to be coming into worker business object, but benefits information will be sitting in benefit related business object. Now you can make some calculations to get benefits data into worker business object, and that worker and that fields, whatever you're making through calculated fields, right, that you will be able to pull those fields in only the report where you have chosen all workers or worker related business object with standard data source. Wherever you have used standard data source related to worker, you'll be able to pull these calculated fields. But the same thing, if you're trying to pull in indexed data source, it will not pull because the source, whatever the data source that I'm taking, right, indexed data source will not be able to have calculated fields in its reports. Okay. Probably you'll be able to see when we're getting into calculated field, but that would be the main criteria why we choose your standard reports versus indexed reports. When you have a lot of data tweak requirements, you'll be obviously going for standard data source related reports. But when you don't have any calculated fields and your data requirements are straight, where Workday delivered fields will work for you, then in that scenario, you can actually choose indexed data source. The performance will be faster and the runtime will be faster than standard data source. Clear? Make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Right.
If you are aware of all these terms, you know what I was referring, know the features of this, your reporting will be easy for you when you're trying to understand more. Okay. Before you know about reporting, knowing this will definitely help you. Okay, this is a base. Okay, you'll not be getting this information even if you go for training, Workday training, all these things you'll not be getting. Because they'll talk about Workday reporting. They'll not talk about any foundation. Let's say if you're going for a Workday certification, reporting certification, or report training, okay, they'll try to create reports and show how does Workday reports works and what is the worker business object, what field that worker business object will be holding, how you wanted to identify this. That level of information within Workday reporting they'll be able to cover. But if you're not a techie, if you're not having any kind of reporting background or any kind of database background, This is a kind of initial foundation that you must be aware. Okay. If you are aware of these terms, you'll be able to understand reporting. And once you are aware of this thing, there are a lot of other areas of reporting that we need to understand. Okay. Till now, any questions anyone have? Anything that is not clear so far? Anything that is not clear? So after we know this, and when you're trying to more about Workday reporting, you should know that Workday will be having two types of reports. One is standard report, the other one is custom report. Standard report, the name itself says that these are delivered reports which are provided by Workday. Standard reports are provided by Workday, and customers will be using these reports that are provided by Workday. And these standard reports, you cannot edit these reports. You cannot add any additional information to these standard reports. You need to use as they are provided by Workday. As how they are, you just need to use those reports. You will not get any edit option, any other options you will not get. You will just get run option. You will be running and viewing the data. You cannot edit those reports. And custom reports, which you are creating right from the scratch. As per your own requirement, you are creating custom report from the scratch. So there is a difference between standard report and custom report. And when you are creating when you are looking for a standard report that is giving all the information that you need, but it is missing, if it is missing one or two fields, one or two information, let's say address report is there, okay, which is giving all the information of address, but it is missing postal code, it is missing city. So these two are very important to have an address. For just two fields, going and building a custom report might not work, because all the information your standard report is giving, but only two fields it is missing. Just two fields making custom report is not a good decision. So Workday provides an option to copy your standard reports to custom report. Okay, you can copy your standard reports and make that report as a custom report and add the fields that you wanted to have, and then use according to your requirements. When you copy your standard report to custom report, you'll be able to edit that report and add the fields that you wanted to have on a report as per your requirements. So when you're actually copying your standard report to custom report, it means that it is creating a new version of the report, which is a custom report. But it does not mean that the entire standard report is going out and becoming a custom report. It's not that. Okay. For example, address is one thing that I was referring, right? You wanted to add postal code and city to this report, and you're copying this address report to custom report. Here it means that address report is not completely converting to custom report. The actual version address will be there, but it is giving a new version for you to add the data according to your requirements. It is when you are copying, it is creating another version of the report for you. But the actual standard report address will be always remains the same. That gives you the standard data, will not give any options to edit. But if you're copying that one, it is giving you another version of this report with all the information that it has, and allows you to add any additional data that you wanted to have. So that you need to know. Okay. And Workday standard reports is further categorized into two types of reports. First type is called as report writer, and the second type is called as express O type of reports. Okay, the standard reports is of two types of reports: report writer and express O. The features of these reportings are when you wanted to copy your standard report to custom report, you can only copy of standard report with the type of report writer. You cannot copy express flow reports. Okay. So now address I was referring, right? Address is an example. If address report, standard report is of report writer type, then only I'll be able to copy and add postal code and city fields to that one. If it is not a standard report, if it is express flow, I'll be not able to copy that report. So standard reports can be copied only when it's report writer, only when the type is report writer type. They cannot be copied when the type is express flow. Now tell me, what is the difference between standard report and custom report?
We cannot edit standard reports, but custom report we can customize accordingly after copying from the standard model.
Yeah.
Standard.
Yes. Standard reports are provided by Workday, and they can just run those standard reports and view the data. You cannot add any additional information to the report. But custom report is what you are creating. Okay. You are creating right from the scratch. You can edit and make any kind of changes to the custom report. Custom reports are created by customers, and standard reports are provided by Workday to its customers. Okay. And what types of standard reports are there?
Report writer and expressor.
What is the difference between these two?
We can edit only the report, the reports of type report writer.
Express flow, can you edit?
No.
Express flow reports, you cannot edit. Okay. And in order to perform all these activities, whatever I was referring, all these reporting activities, if you wanted to perform in the tenant, you need to have a separate security. Okay. Only when you have that security, you'll be able to create reports. So there is a user-based security group called report writer. Okay. Don't confuse between this one and this one. These are independent. Okay. There is a security group called report writer, which is a user-based security group that is provided by Workday that grants you access to create reports, to copy custom reports from standard reports, to view standard reports, to create custom reports. Okay, and all these things you'll be getting access only when you have report writer as a security group attached to your profile or attached to any other security group that will be associated to you. So report writer is a security group that lets you to create reports. If you're not able to view the reports, if you're not even able to find the report that are there in the system, which means that you don't have a right security to view reports in Workday. So that needs to be granted with report writer security group. And there are a few other types of custom reports, probably we'll discuss in our tomorrow session. I don't want to give huge information for you. I'm preparing a document. Okay, I'm preparing a document for this one. Hopefully, you'll be getting a reporting document to you sometime this week. By the time we complete reporting, you should be getting a document with all the things that I'm talking about, so that will be a kind of reference for you.